Well, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my tardiness. I had an appointment that ran long and couldn't be avoided, but thank you for your patience. So at this time, I will call the, what month is this? July meeting of the Paulding County Planning Commission to order. I will dispense with the reading of the policies and procedures regarding participation in a public meeting. A copy of those rules are at the entry point to the lobby back here, so you can take one if you'd like to read over that. At this time, I would ask for you to turn all audible devices. Anybody got any beepers left over from 1980? Cell phones or anything, please turn them off so they don't interrupt the proceedings any more than I already have. And at this time, I will ask if everybody has had an opportunity on the Planning Commission to review the minutes from the previous session of this body. Are there any recommended edits or concerns with them? If not, I'll entertain a motion regarding the previous minutes.
Make a motion we adopt previous month.
I have a motion to adopt the previous month's meetings from Mr. Leggett. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Lowe. All in favor? Motion passes 4-0 and 1. And of course, this is a recommending body, so that anybody who has an application before this commission understand that it is a recommending body. We'll be forwarding these recommendations on to the legal body that will make the final determination. In most cases, two of the cases, it will be the Paulding County Board of Commissioners. And then with regard to the third item on the agenda is the City of Hiram zoning ordinance. That will be forwarded on to the City of Hiram Council. So if you have an interest in that as the applicant, or if you have concerns, questions, or comments that you may want to continue beyond this meeting, you'll need to be present at the 7 o'clock meeting tonight. Is that right?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock tonight for the Board of Commissioners, and the next regular session to be considered by the City of Hiram, you'd have to call the City Hall to see what date that would be. Mr. Robinson, is our applicant here?
Good afternoon. Yes to that question. 2018-05 Z is the first application by Robert Scher to rezone approximately 9.88 acres from R2 Suburban Residential District to A1 Agricultural District for agricultural purposes. Property is located in land lot 101 and 209 and 210, District 1, Section 3. It's on the south side of Ridge Road, and that's just west of Baker's Bridge Road. Address is 4250 Ridge Road. It's in Commission Post 2. We have recommended approval on this application. We've had several calls. We've had one open records request, and we've had some of the neighbors have come and asked questions at the Planning and Zoning office.
Okay.
And if I may, just for a minute until the applicant comes up, I wanted to clarify something. This particular map here that you see on the screen was submitted as part of the zoning application. It kind of was misinterpreted by some of the adjoining property owners. This area in here, outside this blue property line, this rezoning has no bearing. There's no 200-foot buffer. There's nothing that would protrude into the adjoining property owner. It's totally this tract in the green. So I wanted to clarify that there's nothing that this zoning will do to change anything outside of this current piece of property that's up for the zone.
It runs border to border.
That's correct. The applicant is here.
Okay, if the applicant would please come around, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair. For all applications that appear before this commission today, just understand there will be 15 minutes allotted for the applicant. They may use all of that time, or have others that may want to speak on behalf of the application that can use a portion of that time, or you can reserve your time for rebuttal after opposition has an opportunity to speak. Additionally, opposition or anybody who may have questions, comments, or concerns regarding an application will also have 15 minutes accrued time. You may use all of that time, or if there's a list of people who want to speak, then you can try to parse that out amongst those that wish to stand at the podium. All questions and comments will be addressed to the chair, which is me, please.
What would you like to know?
State your name.
Oh, Robert Shire.
Shire. All right, Mr. Shire, if you would, please introduce the application and what your intended uses of the property are.
We'd like to be able to raise crops and livestock on our property and be able to sell what we raise to the community and use it for our own purposes.
Do you plan on any kind of improvements on the property as a part of this rezoning?
Not really. Make the land usable, maybe.
Okay, well, there's no wrong answers, just want to get a full
Okay.
concept of what you're planning on doing.
Not really. It's already got the buildings we need on it. I don't intend to build any buildings. I just intend to convert it to farm use so I can be legal in doing what I'd like to do.
Well, if that's the extent of your statement, questions and questions from the Board of Commissioners or from the Planning Commission will not count against your time. But at this time, I will open it up from the Planning Commission. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Got a question. Do you have a residence on the property? It doesn't
Yes,
show
sir.
as far as any kind of plat of a residence.
Yes, and in the original picture that was shown up there, that you could see the house, the stable, the barn, everything was there.
Also, you understand by having it rezoned as A1 that you're responsible for having, what type of livestock are you gonna have on the property?
Chickens and little goats.
Chickens, well, you're responsible for a fencing along that line that
It's
keeps the
fenced in.
livestock leaving your property, you understand?
I do. It's fenced in now. It was fenced in when I bought it.
Because especially as close you are to Ridge Road and the traffic on Ridge Road, it's a bad
Absolutely.
situation. You're not gonna have horses, cows, anything like that on there?
Not that I know of yet.
Well, if you were to, it does include in agriculture zoning that you can have cows and horses, things
Right.
like that. But you are responsible and you have to have, good proper fencing along. It can't be baling wire, stuff like that. It's gotta be something that will, withstand a
The-
horse or a cow, you know, a major piece
Sure.
of,
The
major
fen-
piece of livestock that it has to stay on.
The property's already fenced in with 4-inch livestock wire and 2 strands of barbed wire above it.
Are there any other questions from the Planning Commission to the applicant? Hearing none, Board of Commissioners, have you any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. You can sit down and withhold the remainder of your time, which was only about a minute. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on behalf of this application? Hearing none, is there anyone here that may have questions, comments, or concerns or wishes to speak in opposition to the application? Sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
Good afternoon. I'm Taylor Wooten, daughter of H. Waitzel and Sheba J. Turner, and sister of Sherry Dale Price here. And I'll be speaking on their behalf today. My parents and sister are landowners with a total of 26.12 acres and adjoins the property of Mr. Robert Stewart. I have one statement and one question. My statement is in regards to the 200-foot buffer map we received regarding this case. We were concerned to see that Mr. Schuer had submitted the map showing the 200-foot buffer that infringed our property. We made several phone calls and visits to the Planning and Zoning Department regarding this buffer, and had been told verbally and in writing that the 200-foot buffer on our property does not exist, but was simply a means of highlighting the 9.88 acres owned by Mr. Schuer. It created a lot of confusion, and we want to thank Mr. Chris Robinson for clarifying that this morning. Nonetheless, we want to formally object to any act that infringes upon our property, and we respectfully request this 200-foot buffer map be deemed null and void and inadmissible with this application from Mr. Schurer. My question, if I could, is in regards to the rezoning. As stated earlier, we have 26.12 acres, which is land lot 100, zoned R2, and with 543.4 feet of road frontage. Our property adjoins two commercial properties, one to the west consisting of 13.47 acres and 29.25 acres to the south. My question to the commissioners, should we wish to sell our property in the future, will this rezoning of the 9.88 acres of the adjoining property from R2 to A1 affect the commercial value of our property?
Please pardon me while I write.
No problem.
I'm going to assume, and you're very welcome to correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes.
that the answer of your question regarding the 200-foot buffer map was just answered by
Yeah.
Mr. Robinson.
Absolutely.
You as much as stated that.
Yes.
You are wanting the buffer map essentially removed from the packet as consideration? Because the way this works, and of course, I've got the loads of experience from Miss Lonnie Skipper here to correct me if I'm wrong on this account, is no one has a right to rezone property held by somebody else.
Okay.
So regardless of what's represented within the packet, there is no legal foundation for anyone to rezone even a portion or a fraction or a buffer around their property that would infringe upon your property rights. Ms.
That's
Skipper.
correct. You can't rezone someone else or place a buffer on another property owner.
Okay.
So, if he had to have buffers, they would have to be within his site, not her site.
That's fine. We just wanted that on the record.
I understand. It will be
Understood.
made a part of the notations that were taken during the course of this meeting. You'll have it to refer to.
Very good, thank you.
With regard to property values, not being a real estate agent or a real estate broker,
Yeah.
I don't know even in that profession if they could take a look at that on a case-by-case basis and make a prospective judgment as to what future property values would be. I assume, again, that it would be impacted by, just as it would any other neighbor, if your property is sitting next to a neighbor who maintains their property, keeps it looking nice, and you can do so with A1. I've seen some very pretty farms. It would have more of an impact on a case-by-case basis depending on the neighbor and the quality that the neighbor maintains their property. I would be very hesitant for this body to say, yes, it will be fine, or no, it will not be, because we won't know the circumstances until such time as the zoning goes through and he proves to be what type of neighbor he's going to ultimately be. Obviously, you have recourse that if somebody is not taking care of their property and it's becoming a blighted area, you would call our marshal's office and solicit a complaint. Preferably, I prefer you talk to your neighbor first and see if you can address it at that level. I don't know that I've answered that question. I don't know that it's really possible
You
to
have,
answer that.
Absolutely. We really just wanted to make sure that our thoughts and comments were on record.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we were concerned about the buffer zone, so we just wanted to have that, recorded in our own voice.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, I will see if any of the planning commission may have questions for you, or the board of commissioners may have. Planning commission. Board of commissioners.
Would you mind pointing out what part of your property or location on the map here?
Yes, it's,
And see,
Oh,
I
okay,
can point
great.
to
that's easier. And it's the
Yeah,
lake
this
and
one here and this one here.
Yeah, that.
And this is the commercial.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then the commercial over here. Or the commercial on the other side.
Any further comments from the board of commissioners? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would wish to speak? Yes, Mr. Collette.
I just want to verify, lake? Thank you, Todd. The property with the lake is the property that they're speaking of? Does that property have the chicken coops? Is that chicken coops? What are those buildings?
They used to be.
Storage building.
They were chicken coops at one time? Okay.
Chicken house.
Chicken house, yeah, chicken house, okay.
Years ago, yeah.
Okay, that's the property you're talking about, though. Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else that would wish to speak in opposition or may have questions, comments, concerns? Please come around, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
Yes, hello. I'm Michael Leland. I'm the brother of Dwayne Leland. He is the homeowner of, if you look, it'd be Lot 32, which is a cul-de-sac on Clearbrook Trail, which mates right up to the property in question. And my brother, he's just wondering about, he couldn't be here because he's in Florida. He was concerned about any chemical use for agriculture.
I can ask that question, and we'll make that a part of bringing the applicant back around.
Yeah, because our property is built right up, and we have a pool 20 feet from the property line,
Well,
and that's a concern.
county does have a environmental regulation. It's a suite of ordinances that they, along with every other local government, had to adopt that allows basically, without a permit, the only thing that you can allow touch the ground as runoff is rainwater. Now, with a permit, there may be other applications that can be used, such as utilizing fertilizers and such, but I mean, there are, even for residential yards, the opportunity to use certain chemical treatments on the yard. But I will
Yes.
ask that question as it pertains to Mr. Shire and his use of the property.
Yeah, as far as, spraying insecticides on his crops and all, that's what we're
Okay.
worried about.
Is there any other questions that
No.
you may have? Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Is there anybody else that would wish to speak in opposition or have questions, comments, and concerns regarding this application? Hearing none, I will move back to the applicant. Mr. Shire, will you please come around? I'm going to address the most obvious one at this point. Is there anything that you're attempting to do with this property that would be detrimental to property values surrounding your property?
I don't believe so. We are sticking to organic gardening as much as possible. We use, right now in our home garden, we use compost. We use marigolds and herbs to keep most of the bugs away. The people that are interested in buying the things that we have to sell aren't interested in having stuff with insecticides on it.
All right, well, in your original statement, you had said that you had made no real plans to do any other types of improvement structures or anything else on the property.
No,
at this time.
I might expand the gardening, that's about it.
All right. Then you alluded to my second question, which was the use of chemicals, as mentioned by Mr. Leland. Is there anything that you can think of that you might be needing to seek permit through the county as far as use on your gardens?
I don't see anything like that. The people that buy produce from farmers, the farm to table market these days, that chemicals are unwelcome in that whole deal.
At this time, I'd ask the planning commission, after hearing everything that we have, are there any questions for the applicant that you may have thought of? Board of Commissioners?
Curiosity. Like the little farm in the set, what's gonna be your main?
Well, we're big on tomatoes right now. Whatever the people would like to buy and I can grow, that's what I'd like to do. That's about the most honest answer I can give you.
That was about as entrepreneurial an answer as you could get.
Now, do you share a joint driveway with Wayne Austin?
I sure do.
Is he familiar with what you're trying to do?
We spoke just about an hour before I came up here.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's no further questions for Mr. Shire. I'll let him take his seat. Thank you, sir. So at this time, I will entertain a motion with regard to application 2018-05-Z.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Mr. Hornback. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Lowe. All in favor? Motion passes 4-0 and 1. Again, the application will be forwarded to tonight's meeting of the Board of Commissioners. The applicant needs to be there for it to be considered. Anybody else that may have a vested interest in this application, please show up. Next application.
Next application is 2018-06Z, application by Carl and Ramona Walker to rezone approximately 3.469 acres from R2 suburban residential. Actually, yes, I want to explain that. To B2 Highway Business District for commercial use. Property is located in land lot 535, District 2, Section 3, north side of Jimmy Lee Smith Parkway, east of Old Mill Road. The address is 3745 Jimmy Lee Smith Parkway. It's in Post 1. We've recommended approval with 10 printed stipulations. We haven't had any calls or noted opposition on this one. I did want to point out that out of the 3.469 acres, approximately the 1.289 is what we're talking about needs to be rezoned. That is this area in the green area. The back portions back were zoned back in the 80s commercial, and this is actually for some reason this one little parcel in the past did not get zoned, and it's actually trying to make it all one zoning.
I see the aerial photo is almost accurate in depicting the metal building straddling that particular line.
That is correct.
Okay.
And the applicant is present.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant please come around, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
Yes, sir. My name's Carl Walker. And we're just trying to get this rezoned so it'd be closer to the compliance of what we're trying to use it for.
Do you mind going into a little bit of detail of what your intended use is?
Well, I mean, it's the big building there was used for commercial truck repair. So, I mean, I'd like to keep it grandfathered in at that. I mean, we're already way out of use, I mean, but that's what I want to keep it going, just get it closer to the zoning.
Make it compliant.
Make it compliant.
You have seen the 10 listed stipulations, I assume?
I've seen some stipulations, but
well, I'm showing 10. If you'd like to have a moment to take a look at it, I'm sure Mr. Robinson can give you a copy.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, Board, just wanted to be clear on this. You see that there's current structures out there and there have been uses there in the past. These stipulations would only apply for redevelopment or expansion of those facilities that are for that property.
But there still are stipulations that the applicant needs to be aware of.
Yeah.
And agreeable to.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand if we expand or do any building out there, then hey, we would be subject to this agreement.
Well, at this time, I will ask if anybody here along the planning commission may have any questions for Mr. Walker regarding this application. Hearing none. Board of Commissioners, any questions regarding this application? I will get to that shortly. Mr. Walker, you can take your seat. You still have a good portion remaining of any time needed for rebuttal. Is there anybody else that would wish to speak on behalf of this application? Is there anyone here that would wish to speak in opposition to the application? If so, please come forward, sign in, state your name, and address your comments to the chair.
My name is Ray Bowden, and I don't live in the Paulding County area, but I have been in business up here with Talmadge McBrayer for 1985 on, so the 30-something years. And we still own properties in 3 or 4 different places around here, so I just wanted to say that so you wouldn't think I was a total stranger from the other side of the world. Now, I own the Border Paint Store, which is next door to Carl and Ramona's property. And during the past, we've owned that store since 2003, 15 years. During that period of 15 years, we've had our store flooded about 3 or 4 times. Not serious enough to cause much damage because most of their product is on the floor, doesn't get hurt. But in the last couple of years, well, Carl has had it rented out to a guy that was trying to sell cars. He then changed and decided to put tractor trailers in there and decided he needed more room. So what he did was he went in there without permission from the development department, scraped off all the vegetation, and put down layers of gravel, which changed the coefficient of the soil from pervious to impervious, and he did not make any development requirements for retention of the stormwater runoff. So the problem that we had with the drainage in the front not taking care of the water just got compounded many times over. Also, during this same period of time, they realized that what they had done was causing their property to flood because the pipe going under their driveway wouldn't handle the water, so it was backing up. So they cut the driveway and put a new pipe in out there, and it still wouldn't keep care of the water, so it was still flooding their property. And also, when they were putting all this gravel in there to park these tractor trailers on, they put about 2 feet of fill over a wetlands area, which has a natural running spring in it. If you go look at it today, there's a stream of water running under their driveway as big as your arm, 24 hours a day. And that has got to be remediated. Usually if you're going to take out wetlands, I know you've heard of this before, you've got to either find another place to replace it, or you've got to clear it back out. And so they got some clearing out to do, and of course I got pictures of all this. Also, when they first developed this property, it was a tractor company they put in there. And the engineering department finally found a record of where they put in a small retention pond, which is right directly behind my building. And it has an 8-inch effluent pipe coming out of that retention pond. And this retention pond was put in over 20 years ago, and it has never been touched since. It's done nothing but get filled in and grown up. And I didn't even know it was there. I'd never seen the pipe. I'd never seen the pond. So Bruce Coyle told him that he needed to get his retention pond cleared out. And I have a letter here from Carl to the engineering department that said that on June the 26th that he would get that pond cleaned out in 30 days, and it hadn't been touched. It's been 30 days. So he hadn't done anything about trying to take care of that problem. And of course he hadn't done anything about remediating all this gravel he put in. And also during this same period of time, the tenant he had in there decided he needed more room to park tractor trailers, so he went next door to a residential property and put in gravel. He rented the space from a person that lives in the house next door. and scraped off all the vegetation on that and filled it in with gravel and packed it, and so there became another acre of impervious surface running water. So when they started doing all of this, it started getting so bad that it was running erosion gullies down into my retention pond, which is not put there for their use. And so they started throwing big chunks of concrete over in there to try to clog up these gullies to keep it from washing so much. And talking to Bruce Coyle, he's got a letter that I have a copy of right here. He sent to Mr. Walker and said that you need to get an engineering company in there. You need to re-engineer that whole property and provide the proper retention, or he's not going to let you do anything in there. And so, even though that wasn't mentioned here today, he said that the zoning people were aware of it. And so I'm wondering when all of this is going to get taken care of before we allow this property to be rezoned and put back into use again. If you'd like to see pictures of the property and what some of the stuff that's been done down there and what the retention pond looks like today, I'll be glad to share them
If
with
you would
you.
like to share that with the planning commission, you can do so.
Most of these, there are 2 copies of each one, so you just want to pull one off at a time. Okay, well, you can do that.
Mr. Bowden, just for my own edification, do you, on the property that you own, the ordered paint storage, do you have a retention pond that is assigned to that store as well?
Yes, sir.
It is for its own use, right?
We've got 3 properties there, the Dock in the Box, Carl Walker's property, and mine is the only one that's got has had the proper engineering and retention done when it was put in. The other 2 are both out there trying to catch up now.
I have a question of you. Who was doing the clearing north of this property toward Pace Road? I've noticed up toward that hill toward Pace Road, been a lot of clearing up that way, a lot of trees cut.
And if it's that
Is
far
that part
away-
of this property?
I'm not sure about that part.
I
Couldn't
don't
answer
believe
that.
so. I don't believe it is.
You don't believe it is?
No, if you're talking about that area behind where the Hale Automotive is,
Yes, north of it.
yeah, that's associated with these properties.
Okay.
Unless that's one of the properties that you own inside Paulding County. I would assume you'd know if there was clearing activity on it.
We own property across the street where the cell tower is, but none on that side.
Is your property located below this property?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and also the roadway out there in front of it, is it also below that?
Yes, there's a a place where our retention pond spills out into the DOT ditch, and there's a 30-inch corrugated metal pipe that runs about 200 feet, and that pipe will not handle all the water that's getting dumped on it during a heavy runoff. And I've had the DOT out there, and they said it's not up to them to fix it. And I said, well, what about all the erosion on 278? And they looked at that and they said, well, that is our problem. But they've looked at it all.
All right, Mr. Bowden, if you have anything else you'd like to add at this time?
That's all. I'd just like to see that, I thought at first I could get my neighbors, and all three of us together could go out there and talk to the DOT and put in a bigger pipe and do some other things to help this situation. If they all wanted to work together, we could do it that way. If not, then I want him to be not able to get rezoning until he agrees to fix some of this stuff up. Otherwise, we just have to let the courts decide who fixes it.
Well, before I move forward, let me make this statement. This is, again, a recommended body. We're not an enforcement
Yeah, I
arm
understand
of
that.
Paulding government. What we will do is to take into consideration what you've added to the discussion. And I will also probably come to you shortly, Ms. Skipper, just to ask whether or not there's any reason this consideration for this application should or should not go forward, based on the comments from Mr. Bowden. If you have anything more that you'd like to add at this time, please do. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and move into that part of the discussion, and then I may ask, probably will ask the applicant to come back around.
That's it.
I can answer my question now.
Please.
No, because this is just about whether or not it's the highest and best use for it to be zoned to a different category. That's what you all are looking at. In terms of the county as a whole, they, may want to look at the other issues because it would be more of a lawsuit related to trespass or nuisance with the water issues. It's not going to relate to the zoning specifically. Is that what you're asking, right?
Yes, but there
Okay.
are code of ordinance violations that could be looked at, or code of ordinance aspects that could be looked at as far as stormwater, or whether or not permitting excavation or improvements to property were done without permits. So I just want to make sure that I'm not going to put the county in a bad situation of moving forward with consideration of the application if there's a reason to hold off.
They don't relate that, none of those
Okay.
issues relate to the zoning itself. Those very well may be issues that need to be looked at, but they don't relate to zoning.
And to be fair about it, I kind of figured that's what you would say.
Okay.
And I just wanted for the record to let you know that there is an active issue out there. It's being handled through our development division. The past tenant that was out there did do some land use activities and non-compliant zoning activities out there and was cited.
Yeah, I can answer that.
And-
He was cited multiple times. He's already been through the magistrate court, and I understand that he was evicted as the tenant there, so he's not on site anymore. I have spent countless hours with the tenant issues.
Is there anybody else here that would wish to speak in opposition to this application? Hearing none, I would like to ask Mr. Bowden if you would please come back to the lectern. Mr. Bowden, I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. My apologies, I meant Mr. Walker. And I know that we discussed at the very beginning of this application's timeframe that you had no intentions at this point of doing any further improvements to the property that is in question, which is the green border, everything within the side of the green border. Is there anything that you can lend to the discussion of what Mr. Bowden has just informed this body of?
Well, like Chris said, the department down there called me about cleaning out the retention pond, and I went down there, the retention pond's clean. I mean, that's like a grass bottom retention pond, and I cleaned it out, and I was pretty surprised to see that they had a drop inlet coming from his building into that retention pond, which it says on I got a hydrology thing where we got a retention pond that runs up in between both our buildings. And it looks to me like they had altered that, retention pond whenever they had built the Porter Paints building and put a drop inlet. I even got pictures of it. And, so I don't know.
Where on this map is the retention pond that's in question?
It's, right behind this building right here in this little.
It's off
area
to the
right
side
here.
of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it runs right up to the inside that corner.
Okay. Sir, you're out of order at this point. I can call you back around if the commission wants to. Continue.
Anyway, so I went down there to clean it out, but on the drawings that, they had given me, because I didn't really have the hydrology thing, but they did down here in the bottom, it showed the retention pond actually being deeper. And like I had told him, I said, whoever had built the building to the side there had altered that retention pond, because it's considerably like, drawed in. I mean, the trees growing at the back of it's like 20+ years old. So it's like, it had been altered. And that drop inlet had been added to that coming back up the hill, you know. And, actually, it shows the water going off there, and it wasn't before, because he made the comment about the water being altered. Actually, it didn't even go in the retention pond, it was running in the front at the road.
Well, it sounds to me like the Paulding County Community Development, as well as the permitting office or the inspections office, possibly even the marshal's office, may have some conversations that they need to have with you at some point. That's not what this board is about.
And Mr. Palmer, if I could add, it also sounds like the property owners may have an issue with each other, which
Yeah, it
would
could
be a
separate
private
matter.
matter, not one that y'all would determine.
So, right now, the question before the planning commission is going to be, you have a piece of property here that has a commercial zoning that surrounds or backs up to this area that's in the green border that is currently listed as R2. It is not compliant in zoning, but it is an approved non-conforming use. Is that the way you would list it, Chris?
That's correct.
So it is the opportunity to look at correcting that to where it is consistent with surrounding zoning. Other than the listed stipulations, unless there's something else that the planning commission wishes to add to this, I don't know what impact we can have as a body regarding the issues that are existing on the property and between the neighboring properties. But if there are any questions for the applicant at this time from the planning commission, please feel free to do so. And I'll yield the floor to whoever wants to ask. Board of Commissioners, any questions to the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. You can take your seat. And I will go back again, just reminding everybody that this is a recommending body for whether or not the proposed use is the highest and best use and should be approved by Paulding County as a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. Is there any other comments to the staff or questions to the staff that this planning commission may have? Speak now. Board of Commissioners, any questions to the staff? At this time, I will entertain a motion with regard to application 2018-06-Z.
You don't take Mr. Walker's, you don't want to get a question.
Well, if you'd like.
I mean,
Mr. Bowden, you had a
yeah.
comment earlier?
Just wanted to clear up one thing if I could.
You come back around so everybody can hear you.
I understand why Mr. Walker doesn't know where this retention pond is because you can't see it. And you have pictures there that shows auto body parts and other things in front of it, so it's in that wooded area back up in there. But I've got, this is what Bruce Cole gave me, that he,
Mr. Robinson, would you mind helping him hold that up in front of us so that we can see it? That way we can just walk it in front of the commission.
this is going down to 278. My building,
If you'll hold that up vertical.
my building sits right here. this is the pond that Bruce wants him to clean up. The pond he's talking about is the one down here between our property.
278 is over on this side right here.
Down here.
Oh, there it is.
And those pictures that I passed out up there, you'll see like the hood of a truck and stuff that pushed back up in the woods there. This pond hadn't been touched in over 20 years. And they had finally discovered where it was originally shown on the plans, and he said this is the one that he wants Mr. Walker to clean up.
Okay.
And that's directly behind my building with an 8-inch outflow going right towards my rock pit. So there's two ponds out there. One of them is the one I put in 2003, and this one was put in 90-something. And it's never been cleaned out in
Okay.
20-some years. So that's what I was trying to clear up. The fact
I understand.
that there's two ponds out there, and he probably doesn't even know where it is.
Okay. Yeah, let's show the Board of Commissioners as well, just so that they have a common frame of reference.
Obviously, the surveyor didn't know it was back there either, because he didn't have it on his plat either.
Quite possibly.
It all comes to that side. And it all goes to the side where he's talking about his shop is, the main store. It all goes to the other side. Yeah, I've seen it. I've watched it happen. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, at this time, I will ask for a motion with regard to application 2018-06-Z. Again, there are 10 listed stipulations. If anybody would like to make a motion, please do so at this time.
I recommend we approve it.
I
I'd
second.
like to recommend that we approve it with the stated stipulations.
I have a recommendation for approval with the 10 listed stipulations by Mr. Stokes. I have a second from Mr. Leggett. All in favor? Motion passes 4-0 and 1. And again, this will be forwarded to tonight's meeting of the Board of Commissioners at 7 o'clock. The applicant has to be present for it to be considered. Anybody wishing to have an interest in this and the conversation needs to be present as well. Mr. Robinson.
The next item on the agenda is a public hearing regarding the City of Hiram zoning ordinance. I'm just going to give a quick little summary, and Jody, you check me and make sure I'm got this down right. It's in regard to retirement-type communities in commercial zoning districts within the city limits of Hiram. What this proposed amendment would do would be taking out any type of retirement communities within any of the commercial zoning districts. And if anyone wanted to develop such, they would have other opportunities under the current residential districts.
For clarification, just so that it's understood, that does not preclude the development of retirement communities that require commercial components, such as perennial care or
Except-
assisted living or any of those
Right.
types of development. It is purely
Active
age-restricted
adult.
subdivisions, single-family, multifamily. And it clarifies what commercial is intended to be versus commercial with a hybrid residential aspect to it.
And for the record, we have not received any comments or opposition to this.
Didn't think you would. All right, at this point, I will open up the public hearing regarding this application or this zoning amendment change for the city of Hiram. Does anybody have any comments or may want to speak on behalf? Does anybody want to speak in opposition? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing portion of that consideration for the changes to the City of Hiram zoning ordinance. And I think that sets us up for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn from Mr. Stokes. Do I have a second? From Mr. Lowe. All in favor? Motion passes 4-0 and 1. Thank you very much for your participation today.